what does the setting screen do? This is where we customize our machine. And that symbol is always on every of the Baby Lock and Brother machines. Looks like a piece of paper that the corner has been turned down. Some machines it may be on the bottom of the screen, sometimes on the top. So just find that same symbol and we will get onto the settings. Depending on the machine, the pages, we might have a little bit different amount on these pages. And then we have little shortcuts. Like this, my machine, I have 12 pages of settings. I can do my sewing settings. If I click the button, it just skipped on page 4. I can kind of do jump on the certain areas of that on the settings in here for the kind of generic machine settings. And then I can go to the page 8 on my machine for the embroidery settings. And then I can get into the page 11, which are then settings for the wireless, which is the same button that if I use the one on the top left corner. So I'm going to go back onto the page 1. I can always scroll down in the bottom one just to page after page. But those little shortcuts that I can jump on. Some of the settings on my machine are a little bit different order that they are on some of the other machines. And when I do this class as a hands-on class in the shop, I have a little overhead that I have each of these pages from the different models. So if anyone wants to have the handout on that one, kind of compare, but really going on your machine's manual. That's the best place to get the exact information on your machine. But I'll go through this one on the order they are on my machine, because those same functions are most of the other machines. They just may be on a different page. But no matter which machine we have, this Wit Control, that is in all the ones as a number 1 setting. And what that allows me to do is, if I turn this function on, let me click this one and I close the window. See, on this case, my Wit setting no longer has a little kind of either plus and minus buttons or these arrows. It has a little symbol of a dial. So if I take, for instance, like a zigzag stitch on it, so for me to change my stitch width on this one is now a dial on what is my speed dial on my machine. So when I move that speed dial all the way to right, it made my stitch width to be the widest. So I can just move this dial on whatever position I put, it will read the settings on that one. Why would I want to use that one instead of those plus minus or these arrow keys? Well, if you are doing like a satin stitching or applique and you want to taper towards the corner, it's kind of hard to try to sew, guide the fabric and touch the screen at the same time. It's much easier to use the little speed dial button on this one. And actually, it'll take the speed dial into our width setting. Well, just a little reminder on this one. If you are a person who does not like to use the foot pedal, then you can't use this function, because in this function to allow to work, you have to use your foot pedal to sew. Because when we turn the speed dial into a Wit Control, that way we don't have any speed control in the machine that on that push button speed control would work. So you must use your foot pedal. So if I unplug my foot pedal on my machine, and then I will try to push the button. Actually, my button on my machine is red, but if I touch that one, it'll kind of give me a sad face saying that when the speed controller is set to control the zigzag stitch width, the stop function does not operate. It tells me that you must use your foot pedal. So I will plug this one back in. So then now I plugged it in, my light when the machine turned back green, so it's okay, I can use it to sew. But that is just, if you see this little symbol in there, you know that now your speed dial is your width setting. So I'm gonna go back and turn this one off on mine. I don't use it very often, but it is nice to have it available. The next 2 buttons, fine adjustment vertical and fine adjustment horizontal. Well, these are little tuning things that sometimes if you are stitching a decorative stitch, those ones that go a lot of back and forth and even sideways, they may some fabrics turn out perfect, sometimes not. What I normally, when I do this class in our shop, I usually use as an example that if you have had an old kind of a more mechanical sewing machine, and you have your 4-step buttonhole, where one side of the buttonhole, the zigzag kind of goes towards you, then there's a bar tag, and then the zigzag goes backwards. Some fabrics, those 2 beads on that buttonhole look perfect. Some fabrics, one side looks denser than other. Why is that? Well, it's because the fabrics, they don't always feed the same way backward and forward. We have really amazing feed dog systems on our machines, so we usually have pretty good feeding. But still, especially in the decorative stitches, you may have a little bit slippery stabilizer, and sometimes they just don't work that way. So on those older mechanical machines, on those buttonholes, there usually was a little screw or somewhere which was called the balance adjustment. So we were able to adjust that balance a little bit, the backward forward motion, that way to have the stitches to be more perfect. Well, we have a computerized machine, so our settings are done in here on the settings screen. On mine at the moment, both are so 0. Again, depending on the machines, you may just have a little plus and minus on these ones. Mine, when I click it, I'll get the little screen that I will select the number I use. And I go from -9 to +9. So I can select for the adjustment for the vertical and horizontal. Well, what would I know how to change it? Well, here's a little example I had shown quite a while ago. It was actually brand new Destiny. We had just gotten out the box, and I had this very cheap, like a really flimsy muslin that I used, and kind of a slippery, more kind of interfacing type of stabilizer behind it. And when I sewed this decorative stitch on the default settings, looked pretty good, but when I look closer, that little ladybug looks like a little bit twisted. Its wings are not lined up. So we have a test pattern on a machine. So I sewed that test pattern with the current settings, and I noticed sure enough the back and forward movement and even the sideways movements were off a little bit. So I changed one setting at a time, just a little bit, and I kept sewing. I was getting better and better. Finally, when my settings were +2 on the vertical and then +2 on the horizontal, I got those lined up pretty good. So then I sewed that stitch. I actually kind of was between +2 and +3 on this one. So I sewed it with the +3 and I got it quite a bit better. So here's the kind of one with the +2. So those look much better. Like I still think that setting was the best. So I got those ones lined up pretty well then. So that was what I did. For this specific fabric stabilizer combination, I needed to have those numbers. Well, if I change to another kind of fabric, other stabilizer, those settings may not work. So I would have to get something else. So that is kind of like I had just done a little test on this one, on this specific fabric, and the stabilizer I used. I had a little gap between, so I just closed the gap. Well, how do I know which way to change it? Because I could, of course, just to do a test stitch, and then I could take this number and try. I used to do it that way, and somehow I always guessed wrong way because I could never remember, did I need to go plus or minus? Well, I just discovered we have a really great function in here under that question mark. So let me close this window, and I'm gonna go onto the character decorative. Most times on these utility stitches, you may not see it as much on there, other than maybe some of these heirloom stitches that go back and forth a bit. But these don't move the fabric sideways, so you never need to adjust the horizontal on these ones. But really where that one comes is the character decorative. And I haven't really talked too much about these stitches yet, so let me go on the character decorative area. And it kind of tells me that, are you sure you want to leave this area? It may say okay to delete. It doesn't mean that you're gonna delete that stitch from the machine. You can't delete any of the built-in stitches. That's all. It's just kind of the wording. They did change some of the wording on some of the machines now. It says cancel instead of delete. So if I hit cancel on this one, I'm back where I was. But yeah, I want to go to character decorative, so I'm gonna touch OK. So I don't even have to pick up the stitch, because on this one, when I select, there's no stitch automatically selected on this one. We just have a lot of built-in decorative stitches on this side. But I don't even have to pick up the stitch, because somewhere on this first group of stitches, there is that test pattern, that little balloon. if I just touch my question mark, and then I go pattern explanation. So it'll tell me that, yep, these stitches that I'm on the character decorative, these are designed to show some attractive finishes. And it even kind of has a little information about how to do that one. So I can kind of click and talks about that. Yeah, you should always have some stabilizer underneath when you stitch these ones, because some of these stitches are really wide and dense. So I go back on that. But the second group is the one that I'm more interested, making adjustments. And it tells me, it's really copy of the manual, that sometimes your stitches may turn out poorly, depending on the type of the thickness of the fabric and the stabilizer used. That exactly was the case on that My Little Ladybug design. So in that case, I would just need to sew the trial stitches with the same conditions as the real sewing, and then adjust it, it says as explained below. Well, it's a copy of the manual. In our case, it's in the next page. But here it is. Here's a test pattern, 6-120. Well, I don't need to remember that number, because in different machines, it's a different number. It's on my Luminaire, it is 120, and the Solaris is the same one. But then the Destinies and Dream Machines and Unities and Dreamweavers, those ones, it's a different number. So don't worry about it. You don't need to remember that one. We just go to the page 2, and here is the pattern of that stitch. So all I had to do is select that stitch, and yes, I need to use the N foot. If I use the J foot, I don't get the good result, because the J foot doesn't let me let the machine to move the fabric as easily sideways. The J foot, the edges are a little bit sharper, so on the N foot it is more rounded and the fabric moves better. So it's important that we put the N foot when you do this test, and also when you sew those sideways stitches. So I will select it, and you hear a noise in the machine because that stitch was selected. And then I'll go to the next page, and now I can see that in case, when I sewed, like on this case, when I had sewn this stitch, it looked like my pattern had a gap. That would be my second part in here. On my first one, when I did this sample, they were punched up. Those legs were kind of crossed. So I can select which way was the one that was wrong. And then also these first two are kind of related whenever I'm using the vertical setting. The last two whenever I have it on the horizontal setting. And on mine, my horizontal was a little bit skewed also. It was actually skewed more like this one to the left. So the top was a little bit further in than the other. So I just looked at the picture to see what is the closest that it would look like. Like mine on this one, it had a little gap. So I would go and get that one. And it tells me that I need to adjust the minus on this case. So I would go to minus button. And depending on how much, like this one had a big gap, I may have to go to 2 or 3 on this one. I can't remember. I didn't write it down on this case to get the gap closed. So that will just make my fabric move a little bit more backwards when it feeds it on that pattern. So let me just go back on that. If it was punched, then it will tell that we need to touch the plus button. So in that case, see, it remembered my -2 on there earlier, because this is really the same setting I'm moving between those two. And the same on these ones, if it is skewed to the left, in this case, I would have to touch the plus, which I had to do on mine. I had to go to +2 on that one. So let me just close this window. So I'm going to hit return, kind of keep closing all the way, and then I see, yep, that stitch was selected. So I could sew this stitch even when I'm on that screen where my question mark was. I don't have to close those windows to sew. So I can actually have my screen up right when I'm doing this test pattern, and then I can check that setting. So let me go on my settings key. You see those numbers that I changed under that question mark button in there, now help screen, they carried over on this one. So I can do the changes here, or I can do the changes through that pattern explanation button. I normally use the pattern explanation because then I don't remember where to find the stitch, and also how to which way to go on my settings. One note about all of these settings, that anything that I change on these settings, these numbers will stay there until I change them again. So even if I turn my machine off, they will still stay there. That's why it's kind of customizing our machine. If I wanted to reset, I could always kind of go in there and reset, because anytime I change something from the factory setting, again, we have the background is a black on the factory settings. Anything I changed, it has a white background. So if I wanted to change all the settings on this screen to be back onto the factory settings, I don't have to do them one at a time. There's a little button that looks like a little sideways kind of a piece of paper. If I touch this one, it just kind of asks, reset the default settings. My machine, I can select, do I want to set the defaults on all the ones for the sewing side, then the machine settings, or the embroidery. So really does kind of all at once. Remachine and Destiny, this button is on each page. It is one page that we don't have that button because there's nothing to change on that page. But this one in here, I could change if I just say that, yep, put all my sewing settings to default. So see, all of those went to default settings now. So I need to go and change some of them back that I had already changed for me. So we'll do that when I go through this one. But I can always manually change them one by one, or then change a whole bunch of them at the same time for factory settings. The next one on my page on this one is a pressure foot height. And that is about to do with the sewing side. Whenever I lift my pressure foot button, the one in the machine bed that looks like a foot, when that's that one, it lifts my pressure foot height at the moment 7.5 millimeters from the machine bed. I can always use the lever on the back, the mechanical lever, to give a little temporary extra lift. Or if I use my knee lever, I can lift it even a little bit higher from that one. Well, if I wanted to have it lifted as a default somewhere a little bit different height, I could go it all the way to 10 millimeters or just lift it a little bit. So depending on the machine, we may have 3 settings, mine have 4 settings. I'm gonna leave mine as a default. But if you are sewing something really thick materials like maybe the fake fur, making little Halloween costumes, that time it's kind of nice to have your pressure foot lift all the way up so that you don't have to manually lift it higher. The next one is a pressure foot pressure. And this one, every machine we have as 4 settings. The default is always at 3. And most fabrics that is just fine. But if I'm sewing really, really heavy fabrics, I may want to lower it to 2 or 1. It's like a quilt sandwiches or something. I may want to lower my pressure foot pressure a little bit. Or knit fabrics, another one. They don't stretch so much. If I have a very, very thin kind of slippery fabrics, then I may want to have a bit higher pressure foot pressure. Most times the 3 is as good on that one. Then automatic fabric sensor system. Again, depending on the machine, this might be on a different page. Mine is on the first page. And it comes from the factory as off. When I resetted my settings, it got turned off. I have this one all the time on. I'm not sure why I would ever have it off, because it is a great one measuring the thickness of the material. And like a picture kind of shows that when you go on a different thicknesses, like over heavy seam, it just makes it easier to go over. It adjusts the tension system and the machine, so it just glides over those heavier thicknesses. And there's a great built-in video under that videos about how to use that one. So I have mine all the time on. We go to the next page. So now on this one, I have the initial position. And because I went on my resetting, now my machine shows that my default position is at the nil at the left. What does that mean? Let me close this window. And when I go to utility stitches, and it kind of tells me, yep, you sure you want to leave this part to go to the other part of the machine? I said, I'm positive, that's where I want to go. See, now my default stitch is 101, needle at the left position. That is how my machine came from the factory. Depending on the model, some of the ones the default stitch is 103, some of the one is 103, 101, either one. I kind of prefer, I somehow guess this is my personal preference. I like my default stitch to be 103. So that is one of those settings that I had changed earlier on my machine. But when I did the reset, they kind of went back to factory settings. So I'm going to go back on the needle at the center position. Because now if I go to the character decorative side and come back, now it's going to give me that stitch. So it's just my default. I can always move my little position or pick up another stitch, but I want that to be my default. Then on the pivoting height, when we turn on that pivoting function, that was that little button on our screen, so that if I turn this one on, and when I stop sewing, my pressure foot will lift up a little bit. And how much it will lift up? On my case in here, at least 3.2 millimeters, about 1/8 of an inch. If I want it to lift less or more, I can change that. Again, some machines we have only 3 settings, mine has 4 settings for that one. Most times my 3.2 is fine, but if I'm sewing really bulky material, something really soft like maybe applique and a polar fleece, if my foot only lifts 3.2 millimeters up, I may not be able to really pivot the fabric. So in those cases, I may want to have it a bit higher, but I leave mine at 3.2. Then free motion height, when I'm doing free motion quilting or thread painting, any free motion work, this is the distance that how high my foot is going to be floating above the surface. Again, I could go a little bit closer to the fabric, or I can lift it way up. Most times on thinner paddings, this default works great. But if I'm using really bulky padding, this default setting wouldn't really let me to move the fabric very easily. The foot is kind of dragging on that surface on the fabric. So in that case, I would maybe want to lift my foot a little bit higher. I'll leave mine back to default, so that way, if I do something bulkier, I can change it. The next one is a dual feed adjustment. Several machines these big machines come with the digital dual feed. Brother calls it a move it foot because it is just like a walking foot in steroids. For this one, when I plug it in, I can adjust the speed of the belt. So the dual feed foot looks really quite interesting. It has a little tail that we need to make sure you plug it in the machine, because that one provides the power for this belt to run. So the adjustment on this one allows me to change if the belt wants to run a bit faster. So the default is at 0, but I can go to -10 all the way to +10. So if for some reason, if I'm stitching, maybe my padding is a little bit slippery and my foot is still pushing my padding a little bit more towards me, I can then have my belt run a little bit faster. Maybe if I go like +3, whatever, depending on how much it is pushing that top layer towards you. That means that my belt is just running a little bit faster than my feed dogs is pulling the fabric from behind. On the opposite case, if my top is feeding too much, I can also go to negative numbers. I'm just gonna leave at the moment to 0. So depending on what I do, I will adjust that one. We have a little lever on this foot. And if I put it on the up position, I'm now disengaging the belt. My belt would not be pulling my fabric in this case. So it's used when if you do reverse, because you really shouldn't be doing reverse stitching when your belt is down. So when I go forward, I need to lower it back down. So and then of course my foot, I don't have the sole at the moment. The machine comes with 1 sole. Some of the machines you may have 2, but there are a total of 5 different soles that can be used. So on my one of the videos that I made for the class number 3, I'll do a little demonstration on that foot. Then we have, again, depending on a machine, some of these ones are only available with like a Dream Machine and Destiny. They are available as part of the upgrade. And then some of the smaller machines, we don't have this option. And then some of the, like the Dream Machine and Destiny with the upgrade, there are 3 functions on this one. And they might be on a different page. It's just these settings, depending on the machine, the model, they may just be on a different pages. So my handout kind of shows those ones, but the machine's manual is the best one to see exact order what it is on your model. Well, this one, again, as a default, when I resetted my settings, this went off. I had turned these ones both on. What these do, let me have to put them back off. At the moment when I have this one off, and if I lift my pressure foot up on my machine, the light on the machine is red, meaning that I can't sew. If I try to now, if I hit my foot pedal, because I'm not connected, it will tell me that I need to use the pressure foot lift button to lower the pressure foot first. So it kind of always tells. If you wonder why it's not showing, you just try it and it will tell you. So if I have turned this one on, now the light on my machine is green. And if I start stitching, it's going to lower my pressure foot down and it will allow me to start stitching. You're gonna hear little noises in there at the stitching. So this one just kind of takes that extra step away, that I don't need to anymore lower the pressure foot down when I start stitching. Again, it's a thing, if you don't like that function, you can turn it off. It came off as a default. I like mine on because it's one less thing I have to do when I'm ready to sew. I can always still manually lower the pressure foot by touching the button on a screen or using the knee lever. I still have all those manual functions available in addition, even if I turn this one on. That's what I like on this machine, is we have all these options. Well, then on the Dream Machine and Destiny with Upgrade 2, there's also, I think, Auto Up. And on that one, you have an option to have your pressure foot come up when you stop sewing. I never liked that function. I hate it when my pressure foot popped up, because if I want to have it to pop up a little bit, I'll turn on my pivoting function. But if I don't want to have, and then I don't like to have it popping up. So I had always turned mine off anyway. Well, I was glad to see on my Lumine, I don't even have that option. Because if I want to have the pivoting, I can turn it on separately. But if I don't want it, I want to keep my pressure foot down when I'm stitching. The next one in here is press to trim. Well, what does that mean? Well, I have this one, mine turned off. If I have it turned off, then what it means is that when I touch the on the machine bed, that the scissor button, the trim button, my foot would stay down. But if I turn this one on and I touch the thread cutter, my thread got cut and my pressure foot got lifted up automatically. So I didn't have to manually lift it. Again, it's just one of those little time savers. So that's again my personal preference. I have mine on these ones turned on. But you can always turn them on and off, try them different ways. And again, anytime you want to change the settings, you just go on a settings screen and change them. But you will keep in there until you change them back. The next page, this is one more place that I can define what is my default stitch. At the moment, my default stitch is the stitch 103, because I had on a previous page changed my settings to be the nil at the center position. And then I have selected to be my utility stitches. If I select this Q stitch, let me go back on the previous page. See, I don't even have now option this one's available. On some of the machines, these two settings are in the same page. They kind of beside each other. On Lumine, they put on two different pages. So what this would allow me to do is to have my default stitch. So again, if I just go even to the home page and I come back to the sewing, my default stitch now is the piecing stitch in the middle. It's on that Q tab, the Q01. And that's the stitch that is locked in the center position. So if I am a quilter and I like doing lots of piecing with the 1/4 inch foot, I may want to have this to be my default stitch. I'm not really a quilter, so I use normally that one and then I have my nil at the center position. But that is how I can customize between 3 different stitches to be my default. Because I can always change a stitch. It's just what my default is. And then I kind of mentioned, feels like a long time ago, that we have a reinforcement priority. So on the reinforcement priority, on this one, when I selected the straight stitch nil at the center, stitch 103, and I turn my automatic reinforcement button on. So in this case, if I start stitching, my machine will sew 3 stitches forward, 3 back, and then continue forward. So when I want to finish the seam and if I want to reinforce it automatically in the ending, now if I have my reinforcement priorities set off, like I have it mine at the moment set off, what that means that when I touch my between those 2 reinforcement buttons on my machine bed, the circle or the U-turn button, if I touch the circle, it's gonna stitch in place, even if I have selected this stitch. If I touch the little U-turn button, it will go back and forth. So, and then the same thing on if I have the stitch 1 or 2, in the beginning, it will stitch in place. The ending, depending on what button I touch, it will do that one. That is when this reinforcement priority is turned off. If I turn it on, then on that case, it doesn't matter which one of those reinforcement buttons I touch in the ending, it's going to still stitch exactly the way how my stitch was programmed. Again, that function is only available, I believe, on the Lumine, the Solaris, Dream Machine, and Destiny. So it's and maybe Stellar and Altair. But again, it's just the one that gives me an option how I want the ending to be. The beginning on the reinforcement always go by the stitch, but then on the ending I can select on depending what button I push. I like mine to be off, so that gives me an option that I can have it in the ending, the stitch in place, or going back and forth depending what I feel like it. The next one, multifunction foot controller. Some of the machines, these buttons may be not highlighted if you don't have the multifunction foot pedal connected. But some machines you can set them even if you don't have it. Well, what that one is, get mine from the floor. I love my double pedal. It's kind of hard to put it in a camera, but this foot pedal, kind of like a picture shows, we have 2 pieces. My machine didn't come with that pedal. Some of the machines, like a Dream Machine and Destiny, it is already as a standard equipment. All the others, we have to add it. And I didn't even take my Lumine home without it because I got so used to it, my Dream Machine on it, so I just needed to have it. The standard foot pedal that comes with the machine, it is your gas pedal. The more you push it, harder it goes. Well, the same thing on this one. That bigger button, a bit bigger pedal, when I push it, it's exactly the same as my normal foot pedal. But I have switches. In the front of this foot pedal, there's a little switch. I'm gonna have to show, but if I use the front part, may have a little noise in the machine because what my machine did, it dropped my needle down. So I had programmed that one, that front part of this multifunction foot controller to have my needle up and down function, which is the same function as I would have on my machine bed, the needle up and down. And if I touch it again, it just lifts my needle up. So I kind of had remote control in here for my needle. I don't even have to be close to the buttons. Then we have another button on this smaller foot pedal. That one, all it is, it's a switch. There's no speed control or anything, it's just a little switch. So in this case, if I touch that one, you hear the thread cutting. So this will be then the same as me touching the thread cutter, the thread trimming button on the machine bed. So these are the default settings, how they come from the factory, and most times this is how I use them. I actually very seldom use those buttons on a machine bed. I often use my feet. But I can change those ones. So I could have that first, the foot pedal, the front part of the foot pedal to be a thread cutting. I could have it to do 1 stitch forward. I could have 1 stitch backwards. And I could also have my pressure foot to go up and down, which is that button to put a pressure foot up and down. Or then I could have it so that it will be no settings at all. So I have lots of options. Some machines we have 4 settings. Some of the ones with an upgrade, you'll get a couple extra ones. So I have mine left on this. And I have those same settings for that second button. So it's actually the same settings and I can program them anytime I want to. Again, it will stay there until I change my settings again. But it is a great tool. I just love my multifunction foot pedal, partly because it's a lot heavier foot pedal too, and that way I don't chase it underneath because my sewing room has a tile floor, so that smaller foot pedal kind of tends to run away from me. The next page, now we're gonna go on to the more machine settings. The first 3 pages were on the sewing settings. So this one I can change the language. If for some reason I don't want to anymore have English on the text, I can pick up a whole bunch of, I can even have my machine speaking in Finnish. Let me go back to English because you may not appreciate me having in a Finnish text. Then and that is, by the way, the reason why those movies are also in just silent movies. They could not possibly program them in all these languages. It will be just too much to bother and memory, I guess. Then we can change the lighting on a machine. The default is the highest, the brightest. We have beautiful, really bright lighting on a machine. For some reason, if you don't want as much, you can turn it down. Or I can even turn it off if I don't want to have any light on my machine. Let me go back and turn it back on. Why would I ever want to change it? Most times I like all the light I can have, but I had occasion couple times. I had been at the eye doctor and my eyes were still a little bit dilated when evening when I started to sew, and when I turned the machine on and that light reflecting, it was like, oh, I need to put sunglasses on. No, I don't need to go and put sunglasses. All I did, I just put my light in halfway and I was able to sew. Other times that I turned the light totally off, I was sewing insul shine, which is kind of like it's not the insul bright, it's an insul shine. It's an insulated material that it reflects. It's like a mirror. And when I put that one underneath the machine, the light reflected so badly, so I had to turn it off. So a couple times I had to turn it off. Most times I like it on as much as I can have light. The screen display brightness, again, depending where I have my machine, I can have the display dimmed down, or I can have it even brighter. So let me go back on the default. I think the default worked best with my camera recording too. Then I have the popping sensor, upward popping sensor. That is when the machine detects when you're sewing or embroidering, if your upper thread breaks or you're running low on your popping thread. Notice I didn't say you are out of popping thread. It's just you may still have a little bit popping thread left, depending on how your popping had started to wind up. Because the popping sensor looks the popping a little bit more kind of towards that bottom part of it. Sometimes in the pre-wound poppings, you may have still some thread on the top part, but minute that light kind of goes through that the center of that popping, it will then detect the light, and that when it gives the alarm and it tells you you are getting low on your popping thread. So again, depending on how your popping started to wind, you may have just a little bit left or a little bit more. I can always turn it off. In that case, it will not then it would not alarm about if I have if I run out of popping thread or my top thread breaks. Machine speaker volume, that is kind of when I've been clicking these buttons, you hear little blips. I'm gonna go back to 1. I have my volume at 1. I still like to have a little beep because the machine is telling me something occasionally, so it kind of makes me look the screen what it is telling me. If you don't like the beep at all, yeah, you can turn the volume totally off. That way, if I touch any of these buttons, there's no noise heard on that one. Again, it's a personal preference. I like to have a little bit of volume. If you put it all the way up in here, it's really loud. I had just put it up a little bit on the back on the 3 level when I was playing that video. But now I'm going to go back to 1, so you won't hear so many beeps. Next one, needle position stitch placement. The default is off. If I turn this one on, what it does in this case, if I put my needle down pattern, whether I use the pattern on a machine bed or on my multifunction foot pedal, I could use on that one. If I put my needle down, again, because my pressure foot was up on now this function, it kind of tells me I need to put the pressure foot down first. There we go. So now if I use the needle down, my needle went only down halfway. It didn't go all the way down. But what it allows me to do is my feed dogs dropped also. So I could move my fabric a little bit underneath, and especially if I turn on my camera in there, and let me gonna even put that little overhead one on it. So I could see on that one exactly where my needle goes if I even turn that one on. So that way, if I wanted to see where my needle is, let me actually do one more thing. Let's just go again one more time. Here we go. I'll put it there. So my needle goes down a bit and my feed dogs drop. So I can still move my fabric a little bit. So if I wanted to start right at the edge of the fabric, I can put it right there. I can kind of zoom in a little bit, and I can see that's where the needle would drop, because I have a needle at the left position, so I can see exactly where it would go. And then when I push my needle down, now my needle goes down. So what that setting did when I changed it on to be, let me just close all these windows. When I changed that one to be the needle position stitch placement, instead of when I push the button, the needle up and down button, instead of going all the way down, it just goes halfway down. And then I push it again, then it goes all the way down. It just allows me to move the fabric exactly on that spot. And when I push it one more time, then it will lift my needle up. I'm gonna turn mine off. Again, I don't use that function very often, but it is a nice option to have available. Then this is where I can customize what is the screen that my machine comes on when I turn it on. When I started this presentation, I had turned this one to factory setting where it says the opening screen. That is the one when I turned the machine on, that my machine was not really on yet. It was kind of just waking up. It was showing those pretty pictures, but it was not ready to sew yet. I had to touch the screen, and then I got on the home page, and then I had to go from there to the sewing or embroidery side, which I wanted to sew. Well, I could have my machine to skip one of those pages. I could have my default to be the home page, or I can have my default to be sewing dash embroidery screen. That is how I had my machine set up, and that's I will do again, because I love those pictures. They're very pretty, but I've seen them too many times. So I'm going to just to set those, bypass those pages, because now when I turn my machine on, and I don't have an embroidery unit connected at the moment, which means that my machine would come as an embroidery, as a sewing machine. If it detects the embroidery machine, then it will go as an embroidery screen. So let me close this one, and I will turn the machine off. And I usually wait about 10-15 seconds before turning it back on, because it's like a computer. It's always good to have just a few seconds to turn it on and off. So here we go. I'm going to turn it back on. So now instead of it coming in there as an opening page like I had in the beginning, it will bypass that one, and it also bypassed the home page. So I'm already on my sewing screen because I don't have embroidery unit connected. Anytime if I want to go to any other parts of the machine, I can always touch the home button. I can always get there, and I can go to the embroidery page there, or I can go on to my design center. So I can still get from the home page any of these other pages. So for me, that was just one less thing that I had to do. So that's just one reason I have mine set up to be the initial screen to be sewing or embroidery screen, depending if I have embroidery unit connected or not. Then we have 3 different kinds of timers in here. And if I'm going to go these ones as a default, these ones are all coming this way. So whenever if I'm not touching my screen or sewing on my machine, after 5 minutes, that's the default, a little screensaver comes up. And there are 5 pretty pictures that are displayed on that one. I can change the timer if I don't want to have the screensaver to come off at all, or if I have to have a longer or shorter timer on that one. So those are 5 pretty pictures, and there are different pictures that are on that opening screen. But if I don't like those 5 pictures, I can click the select button, and this just takes a little while in there to go, and I can select my own images on that. So here's the images on my machine. If I touch the customize, then I can go and just to change, I would have to pick up from my memory stick the image, and I don't think I have any images on my memory stick, but I could put them on each, or then if I don't want, I can delete one. So I have the default ones, but I can also customize those if I want to have my own pictures as a screensaver. So I haven't done that. I just left the machine once. But then I had set some of these other timers. As a default, they are off, but I do like these timers. The echo mode, I can set on the 10-minute increments up to 2 hours. And I had this as a 10 minutes, the shortest one. Because this time, if I'm not touching my machine, actually after 5 minutes, my screensaver goes on. If another 5 minutes go, meaning total of 10 minutes that I have not touched the screen or sewn on a machine, then my echo mode kicks on. And what happens on that one is that my screen goes all blank and the lights will be turned off on the machine. The machine is still remembering all what you wear. It's not resetting anything. It's still on that mode. It's just kind of taking a little one-eyed nap. So it's just kind of having a little snooze. You can kind of see that it's still sort of breathing because that start-stop button, the light is blinking a little bit like a heartbeat that, yeah, I'm still breathing, I'm just taking a little nap. I like that one because it saves a little bit in the screen and the energy, so I have mine set up echo mode. It may frighten you the first time whenever you are when you have it on, you forgot maybe that you turn it on, and the machine will then suddenly the lights go off and you go, oh no, what happened? Well, all you have to do is touch the screen again and it will wake up and it's exactly there where we left it. The next one, I have a shut off support mode. That's on other timer. I had long time had it 1 hour. I recently changed it to 2 hours. So this is an again other timer, and I can use any of these 3 timers or none of all. I mean, it doesn't matter how I have, but this is the settings I had on mine. So in this case, now 5 minutes go, if I don't touch the machine, the screensaver goes on. Another 5 minutes, meaning the total 10 minutes goes, my echo mode kicks on, my lights go off, and the screen turns blank. Then if it's been 2 hours that I have not now touched my machine says, I guess you forgot me, I'm going to sleep. It will electronically turn off your machine. And when I say electronically, there's not a little switch to go and turn off that on-off button. We don't have any little man crawling out of the machine to do that one. So that is a really handy because there's been several times that I forgot. I just thought that I went somewhere and then I never came back to my sewing room on that night. And then I go back next day and I notice, oh, I never turned my machine off. Well, luckily my machine was self-sufficient and turned itself off after 2 hours. I used to have a long time 1 hour. I just recently I was doing something that it kept turning off 1 hour to it was too short time. And I said, oh no, I want to have it 2 hours. So you can always adjust that time or if you don't like using it. On this time, if that timer kicks on, and if you just touch the screen, your machine kind of goes like a little bit like, oh my gosh, you just woke me up. And a blank screen comes up with a little text on the top saying, shutdown support mode was activated, please turn off and on your machine. So it just kind of tells you that you have to flip that on-off switch. You turn it off, and then turn it back on to turn your machine back on. Because literally the machine can electronically turn itself off, but it can't flip that switch. I like those functions. Well, then I have a mouse pointer, and I will point it out that I'm using a mouse. Yes, mine actually is a baby lock mouse, so these the machines play well together. So even if I have a brother machine, but it needs to be a mouse with the tail. So see, it is a USB mouse, not the wireless. You can't use a wireless mouse with the machine because wireless mice, they require drivers to be put in your computer. Well, we can't put any drivers in our machine. So that is why it has to be a mouse with a tail. But what this allows, when I plug it on that second USB port, I can change the pointer. So see, my pointer looks like the picture at the moment. If I don't like that pointer, I could have my pointer to look like this one or like this one. I kind of like the default, so I leave it there. It's just kind of, I think the programmers have too much fun. The next page, this is now only on the Solaris and Luminaire about the projector, because we can project the stitches on the sewing machine side and then on the embroidery designs on the embroidery side on the machine. So we have a little settings page for that one. One is about the brightness. So I can kind of change the brightness on that one if it looks like it's not bright enough. So I can just put it brighter, or I guess I kind of brighter, but I can have it less if needed. I leave it as bright as I can. And then on the sewing stitches, I can have the background depending on the fabrics I have. Sometimes the gray one or the black one or white one works better. And then again, sewing side, whenever I'm projecting the sewing stitches, I can kind of have them a little bit exposed more, kind of having a little extra outline around them, make it a little bit more visible. They look like on a computer when you are typing, you have the fonts and then you can make them bold. Well, that's the same. That makes those patterns more bold if I turn it on. I had mine turned off. And then on that pointer, that little drop pointer, like on the embroidery side, I can use the position for my needle drops. I can change the color on that one. Again, depending on fabric, some colors may show better than others. And the pointer shape, you can either have it as a little T or as a dot. Again, this is an embroidery side. And here is the camera needle position settings. That's the one that was the calibration. Remember when I talked about this little sticker that you can calibrate? That is where that settings is done on this machine. On the Destiny and Dream machine, it's a little bit different. You just have to look the manual or the little question mark on that one. So I'm just gonna skip that part because I said I only done it once in my life. The next page on my machine shows information about the machine, and it tells me in here that I have the upgrade kit number 1 and it has been installed. If they are depending on machines, we have certain upgrade kits that have been added during the years. If that kit has not been installed, but if it is available, it will show that kit, but it doesn't have the check mark beside it. That means that can be added. So that is where the little certification button then would come up, and that's a kit that we have updates and upgrades. The updates, which are just to kind of free updates that occasionally the manufacturers put out, but the upgrades, those often have also some hardware, but they always have a lot extra functions for the machine. So those ones have a price tag included. So in that one, you'd have to go and get the upgrade and then install it. So that upgrade then get married with your machine. So that is what the certification means. On my machine, I had the upgrade kit number 1 installed, so I have a check mark on that one. And I don't have any upgrade kits available yet. So I'm sure more comes up. There's plenty space for additional ones. Then on this bottom part, we have information about the stitch count. And it will show on depending on machines. Some of the ones you may only have one count number, which says the total count. Some of the ones you may also have a service count. The total count means the total stitches on this machine that has been done on the sewing and embroidery. Yep, I have about almost 3.5 million stitches. And I use mine mainly for sewing. I have a multi-needle embroidery that I use for most of my embroidery, but I do some embroidery on this one too. So that just shows the total number of stitches. Sounds like a big number. That is still nothing for these machines. This is still a baby. The service count, oops, I need to tell Alan that my machine needs to be serviced. Actually, he has done some service, but I think he didn't reset. I'm one of those shoemakers kids that don't have shoes. So I kind of had to beg occasionally remind, by the way, I think my machine needs service. So he may do some service, but then looks like he didn't reset my counter. If you have a service counter, he normally, when you're a real customer, you'll get the count reset after the service. So I need to remind him about that. Then we have a machine number. This one is not the serial number of the machine. The serial number that is used for registration, that is stamped on that little metal plate on the back of the machine. And it has letters and numbers on it. This one is a computer board number. So this one, what it means is that it is used when we marry that upgrade kit with your machine. So it is tied up with that machine number. Also with the brother machines, if I want to go and purchase some additional designs from the Embroidery website, then I will just put my machine number, and then of course my machine has to be registered for me, and then I can get those embroidery designs to match for mine. Then on the version number, on this one, my machine is at 2.004, which is the current, the latest update. These are the free updates. Occasionally, the manufacturer puts updates available for the machine, and then I can download those ones. I can either install them myself, or I can have Alan to do that when Marlene, whoever is servicing the machines in a shop. The service technicians can do that also if you don't feel comfortable. My machine has a wireless connection, so I have mine set up so that whenever there is an update, the machine will detect that one, and if there's an update, I'll get the little explanation mark beside this wireless symbol on the top left corner. And then I still have to manually request that upgrade. update, but it just gives me a reminder that there is one available. That's only on these machines with when we have the wireless capability. But I can update my machine on this machine wirelessly, or I can use the memory stick. Destinies and Dream machines, I can do with the memory stick or direct computer connection, and also all the other Unity Stream Weavers, and all those telealters, all those other ones we can also use the memory stick. So next one, now we're gonna go to the embroidery settings. And again, on this one we have just some settings that are just visual, because on our machines we don't have to tell the machine what frame we are using. I can put any embroidery frame on a machine. They call them frames. We tend to call them hoops, but the frames are hoops. If I put the hoop on a machine and I'm ready to embroider, but if my design's not is too big or not in that embroidery area, that hoop, it's not gonna let me sew on it. My machine will read the hoop I have put in the machine. Well, why do we have this place that I can change it? And if I select that one, I have all these hoop sizes available. So maybe I'm gonna do some designs that I want to make sure they'll fit onto the 5x7 screen, or 5x7 hoop. So if I select that hoop size, I sew the little dotted line around it. It's just as a visual. So that way, if I want to make sure that that design will fit onto that area, I better stay within the box when I'm creating the design. So if I go outside the box, and if I put the 5x7 frame in an embroidery unit and I want to stitch, it will just say, put a larger hoop. So all it is a visual. So it is really handy feature when I'm designing something. Because my machine have an upgrade one, there's that's a question I occasionally get, that, well, how come that new 10 and 5/8 by 10 and 5/8 hoop's not listed? It is. It's the very last one in the bottom, because that's the extra hoop that came with the upgrade. So there are lots of additional hoops that can be used with the machine. Then I can also display how I want to, if I want to have a grid on it. My default was at the moment in here no grid. I could have a little just the crosshairs on it. I could have just a center dot, or then I can have the 3/8 of a grid, which would be the plastic template size, or I can have a 1-inch grid. So these are all just visual how I'd like to have my display. Solaris and Lumine, I get a little drop-down window on these. All the others, you just kind of touch the plus and minus to kind of go, or the little arrows to kind of get onto the different ones. But we have the same functions. Then the maximum embroidery speed. Oh, notice mine is only 700 stitches a minute. I very seldom go to maximum 1050, that's a default is, even though I have a nice koala cabinet. But I often tend to go a bit slower speed. But I can set my maximum speed on this screen. The sewing side, we can set the maximum speed by that dial on the machine bed. But on the embroidery side, that does not do anything. That is only for sewing. So the embroidery side, we can change the maximum speed just on the screen on this page. The speed will change while you're stitching, depending on the stitch, on the embroidery design. If the next stitch, if you have a longer stitches between, longer stitch length between there, those ones will take a longer the hoop to move. So the machine sounds like it's slowing down a bit. Sometimes it goes faster. That is just how the embroidery machines work. This is just the maximum speed. That doesn't mean it always goes 700 stitches a minute. It is the maximum it can go. Then we have embroidery tension. I could set up my tension a little bit less or more. I most usually leave this one 0, unless I'm doing something that I would be constantly changing my embroidery tensions or the design. Then I could go and change this one, because anything I change on the settings, as a reminder, it will keep it there until I change it again. I usually change my tension for embroidery on the embroidery page. So let me go to the house key, and I'm going to go to the embroidery page. And I just pick up one of the little designs on this one, just something from this last group. Then we take that little guy there. Oh, that is a little guy. So anytime I pick up an embroidery design, and again, this is same for all the machines. When I go to the embroidery screen, we have on this one, there's a picture of a scissors and look like a little tension symbol. If I click this one, I can change the tension on this one just for this design. So if I'm doing a part of this butterfly, maybe I want to do this one with the metallic thread. Normally metallic threads, I call my tension to about 3. It's just my kind of a go-to setting. Or if I'm doing some other technique, I may have to adjust some of these tensions. Like, quilting, I may adjust the tensions a bit. That is just a temporary adjustment for this design. If I pick up the next design, it's going to go back to default setting. So that is what I normally use for changing the settings. But if I was doing a lot of things with the metallic thread, I could maybe then just to change overall my tension to be a little bit less. But just kind of have to remember that will keep in there until I change it back. But we have 2 places to change the embroidery tension. Then we have the embroidery foot height. As you notice, when I was on the embroidery page on my machine, let me go back on here on, if I touch the embroidery page, and I just picked up some design. So when I was in embroidery page and I went for my settings, it automatically brought me for the embroidery settings page. So it only read that, oh, you're an embroidery side of machine, you may want to do your embroidery settings. I can still always go on anywhere where needed, but it's kind of a clever how it only takes me straight on that area that it thinks I'm going to be working on. So the embroidery foot height, the default setting, the foot hovers about, I think it's like 1 millimeter above the surface. Most times perfect setting. But if I'm doing really thick bulky towels that my foot is dragging on that stabilizer or the topping, or very thick quilt sandwich, I may want to lift my pressure foot height a little bit. But you don't want to have your foot height floating too high if you're doing normal embroidery. Or I don't want to have it really dragging on the bed either, so I don't really want to have it there. So most times this one is a good setting. You want to have a little gap in there so that there's no flaking on that hooped material, but it's also that your foot is not dragging on the surface. So we can change the height on that one. And then this is only on the Solaris and Lumine, and the embroidery needle stop. As a default, most machines, whenever if you push that stop button to stop the embroidery in the middle of it, it will stop my needle down position. And that was a default on this one too. I had put it up. I kind of like to have the needle come up. I don't know why, but I guess because I could do it, so that's why I changed mine. Again, this is only on Solaris and Lumine. Then this is another function that only is available on Solaris Lumine and with the upgrade kit 1. So if you don't have the upgrade kit 1 on Solaris Lumine, this button is not there. I love this function. Again, I'm a lazy person, so it's one less step for me to do. So if I'm ready to embroider and I'm on my embroidery screen, so if I go in there on the embroidery screen on my machine, so if I had embroidery unit connected and in embroidery foot in a machine and also the frame in a machine locked in place, ready to embroider, in that case, if I go and then I don't have to lower my pressure foot, all I have to do is just to hit the start button and it will start stitching. If I have this one turned off, I still have to lower my pressure foot then. So again, it just takes that extra step out that when I'm embroidering, my embroidery, I'm an embroidery screen and my embroidery foot is on, embroidery hoop is in a machine locked in place and ready to go. All I have to do is hit the start button and the foot will go down automatically. Then embroidery side, we can change our units to between millimeters and inches. And see, when I change it to millimeters, everything is in millimeters. It's only embroidery side that the units can be changed. The sewing side is always in metric. Then on the embroidery side, I can display the color different ways. I like to have mine usually just show the name of color. What that means is my colors actually turned out that this was an applique design, but see, my colors says like dark apricot, dark beige, field green, such generic names on that one. If I wanted to use certain specific thread brand, then I will pick up the 1, 2, 3, and I had picked up the Floriani thread on my case, but I can pick up on a different thread brands on this one. So if I had, I think they came up originally as embroidery, which are the Prado colors. So in that case, it will show that, because I didn't go back and read this design, it read it from my previous setting. So it will show that those will be the Floriani colors. Let me go back. Let's just get this one out of the way. And if I pick up that design again. So now it is on the Prado colors. So see, I had to kind of go back and read that design again because I changed it in the middle of it. But I can select the brand that I want to use if I want to have exactly those colors. So I'm going to go back because I have so many different ones. I'm still going to go to Floriani because that's the one I use a lot. And then I'm going to go in here, put name of color on mine because I have lots of other brand threads also. So that way, if it says salmon pink, I said, that's close enough for me. Then we have a couple kind of visual things in here. I can select the embroidery background color. So default on mine is white. Let's say if I want to put like a little bright kind of a lime green. So now my background behind this design is lime green. So I could kind of see how did those colors look like if I was using this kind of a background fabric and those colors. Well, maybe not the best combination. So that way I could go and maybe I could change kind of colors a little bit to see what would look better on that one. I'm just picking something in there. Maybe that wasn't the best one either. So I can kind of see and I can change the colors. I think this is some of those applique colors in there. So I can change the colors on there and just to audition how my colors would show. Let me go back on. I'm gonna put back to white. But there's lots of colors I can pick for my background. And the same way I can also select the colors for the thumbnails. So if I select a color, like a teal color there, and we go back to the home page, so I can go to embroidery. And when I pick up the designs, you see now all of my thumbnails have that background color. So again, I will just go back and put mine back to white. I'm kind of boring. Then the thumbnail size. I can change depending on the machine. I can have 2 sizes. Mine, I have 3 options. I don't see very well, so I have picked up the biggest. That just means that that is the size of these thumbnails that I see. I may have to scroll down more to get the designs, but I can also do this one. I can pinch it on this one. I can kind of have a shortcut on this machine. All other than Solaris and Luminaire, you have to go through the settings to change that one. Then we have embroidery pasting distance. The default is 5 millimeters. What that means, let me pick up some of those smaller designs again. Let me get that same little butterfly there. Let's see, I cannot get in set. There we go, maybe pick that little butterfly. And set that one. So now if I go to the embroidery screen, I have on some of the settings on this one. If I go to layout button, there's a button that allows me to put pasting stitches around it. So on this case, it just added a little box around it. And what the number 5 millimeters meant is that that box is 5 millimeters from that boundaries of this embroidery design. Most times that's a perfect number, but if my design was so big that it barely fitted onto the hoop, and if I add my pasting stitches, it may no longer fit onto the hoop. That is a time that I have sometimes changed this distance to be a little bit less than that 5 millimeters. Let me get there with this. So I can even change it all the way to 0. That means that your embroidery stitches may kind of go over that pasting stitch a bit, but that way I don't have to change into a bigger hoop. So again, that really depends on the application. And then last page for the embroidery settings. This is again only the machines that we have a camera. So it's meaning the Dream Machine, Destiny, Solaris, and Luminaire. We have the background image display, so I can scan my background whenever I'm doing embroidery. Let me go back on embroidery in here. I have because we have a camera that I can always turn on for the overhead view, but we have also another camera on this one, either on the embroidery page, or I have the same one in here on that on the editing page. So if I touch this one, again, I don't have embroidery unit connected, so it doesn't really scan, but I could hit the scan button and my machine would scan the hoop and then take a picture of that image, and then I can move it around to see exactly where it goes. Just close that one and we go back onto the... So I can do the scan on the standard or the fine resolution. Most time the standard is enough for me, the resolution. If I go to fine, it'll take just a longer time to scan it. The background image where the button says delete, it just has this background image on there. And if I go back and I will hit this one, so my machine, I even have an on button. So if I turn that one on, so you actually see the background of the last scan. And that was one of the videos that I had done, little projects. So if I want to put this little butterfly kind of close to that flower, so it still had my last background image. Sometimes I get this question, and actually not sometimes, fairly frequently got the question that how do I get rid of that background? This looks like there's an embroidery design there and I can't get rid of it. It says, well, it's not the embroidery design. It's the image that we had scanned the last time. So Larsen Luminaire, I just touched the off button on here. But if I have my or the other machines, then on the settings page, you'll have a button that you can turn it off. We just have the button in the different places. Or if I touch delete, it just kind of tells, am I okay to delete the background image? And I say, okay. So now I don't have that background. So see, I don't even have the option to have it turned on or off until I scan on other background. So that just kind of deletes that last scan, because it always gets overridden whenever I do the next scan. Fabric thickness sensor is only used with the embroidery scanning. It's nothing to do setting the tensions or anything for the embroidery. We had a fabric thickness sensor in here, or the automatic fabric sensor system on a sewing side. It's different. This is sewing side. It actually does adjust the tension system and a foot height a little bit. Embroidery side, all this one does is it will just give me a more accurate scan, because the camera is not right above the needle. There's no space for that one. The needle's there. So the camera looks a little bit in an angle. So if we have a thick material, like big thick quilt sandwich, then if I turn the fabric thickness sensor on, I get a little bit more accurate scan. And when I have it on and I touch that button to scan, in the first question it will tell you to put the positioning sticker. And it tells you, shows in the machine where to put it. And it tells you to put it upside down. So you just put it exactly how the machine tells you to put it. And then that's on the screen, okay. And then the machine will check where that sticker is. So it determines the height of that sticker, meaning the thickness on the fabric. And that way your scan will be a little bit more accurate. I normally, I have this one turned off. I was doing some quilt things earlier when I had scanned it, so I had left it on. But most times I have it off. Thinner fabrics, it's just an extra step for me. Then I have one more bar in here that is kind of grayed out because I don't have the embroidery foot and embroidery unit connected. But if I had an embroidery foot that has the laser light, I could also then adjust that laser light to be exactly on that spot. The Unities, the Rim Weavers, Rim Machines, Destinies, those machines come with the embroidery foot that has a laser light. So you can do adjustment in case if that little dot is not exactly shining on the spot where your needle goes. So you can do adjustment. I don't have that foot. I just have the standard foot for mine. Then the next two pages on my machine are then related for the wireless. So again, the machines that have the wireless connection, I can access for the settings either on that button in the corner or then this one here. I have turned my, because whenever I had got my machine, the default on this one was turned off. So I had turned it on, and then it shows in here. This is kind of funny looking name. It's my old address in Finland, so it's just a long name. So that is the name of our wireless router at home. So whenever I had turned this one on, and then all I had to go in the wireless LAN setup wizard and that search for the wireless wireless routers or the connections, and I found the one that was ours. I selected that one, and then I had to enter the password, and then my machine is now connected. My machine, I'm kind of been boring, and my machine is still called sewing machine. I could really go and change it and give a name for that one. I could say Aira sewing machine. I'm just lazy. I'm going to leave it as it is. But I can even change the machine. Where is it used? Well, I have the palette, the P11 software also, the Brother P11 software. So I can send embroidery designs wirelessly. And that is then how, when I connect onto that machine, then I know that that is the machine I'm sending to. Because in case if I have multiple machines, then we can send it to different ones. That is the same whenever we have the Altair, Stellar, and the Meridian machines where we use the app. On those ones, you need to, again, if you have multiple machines on those ones, so we know to send it to the right machine. So I usually may want to give a different name for that one. Some of these others are more onto the wireless settings. I have not touched those ones because I don't have anything special settings on mine. All I just had to do using the wizard, get it connected. We have a little app guide on this one if I want to go. Because my machine, I also have the upgrade. So we have a stitch monitoring. And on that one, I can then have on my iPad or my phone, I can see what my machine's doing when it's embroidering. So this is just a kind of a way to get my app onto if I have an Android or if I have a Mac device. So that is only really on when you have the upgrade. And then I'm going to go to the last page. This is again on one of the updates that came out of the, if your machine is Luminaire Solaris is still anything before the release 2, you don't have this page. It came with the update 2. But this one allows me now to have my machine to automatically check to see if there are updates. So I have turned this auto download on. As a default, it came off. So if you don't want to have your machine automatically checking on if there's an update available, you can turn it off. And then you can do always your updates manually. But on mine, I kind of like the convenience, so I have mine on. So if there's a new update, after my machine's been connected to wireless for a little while in there, it kind of checks. And if there's an update, I get a little blue exclamation mark beside the wireless symbol. And then it will tell me that there would be a new update available. Well, mine tells that that's the latest and it has been installed. So I'm good so far. I don't have any updates at the moment. So that was all the settings that I had on for the settings screen. Let me go a little bit just to some of the settings on the character decorative stitch side. So I was going through more about the settings on the utility side, but we have lots of pretty stitches on the character decorative ones. And all of these, they are just lots, and some of these stitches are very large. So if I go towards down and we have some like a stippling stitches, so that is a pretty large. On my machine, because we have a fairly big area to show the stitches, it still shows at 100%. If I pick up this stitch in here, this one that is little kind of waves, it doesn't look that big, but there's a number that says 50%. So this stitch is actually twice as big when I sew it out. It just was so big, it didn't fit on this area. That is where this image key is very handy. If I select that one, it shows me the actual size of this stitch, and it is one large stitch. Also kind of shows that you will start stitching from this side. So if I'm sewing this on a border, I need to make sure I kind of start it from the side because it will move the fabric sideways there. Then on this one, again, we have different groups of the stitches. So on this group, most of these stitches are not very big. They are kind of just more, most of them are just a little bit smaller, still not very small, but if I go to group 9 on mine, these ones in here are no larger than 7 millimeters. But we have a lot of stitches. Now we have a difference on different machines. On only the Solaris and Luminaire, if I pick up some of these really large stitches, my width setting in here, I can do still on a sliding scale, and I can make this even a little bit bigger and lengthen it out as well. All the other ones on that first group, the group 6 and group 8, all you have is small and large. So we can't use the scale function on that one. There's a little button on the side that has a small or large. Because these stitches, some of these are very big. So large Lumine, we have a little bit more option to resize these ones. But then when we go on to the groups on in the smaller stitches, on these ones, I can then, on any of the machines, I have my normal width and length settings. So I can still use those ones. All of these decorative stitches chose to use the foot end because it does let your fabric to move sideways easier than the J foot. So it's important to use that foot. So we have a lot of stitches in there. And those Lumine, we also have some of those beautiful Mickey Mouse stitches. I just love this. I love Mickey. That's the reason I have the brother machine. It's just because I love Mickey. So those are some large Mickey stitches on that group. Then we have fonts, and we have on this machine I have 4 different fonts. So I could then enter my name because these really are they are letters. So I could just put, actually I have my Mickey Mouse in there, and I'm just adding letters on that one. So I have now Mickey and then my name, and then I could have also the different fonts. There's 3 different fonts, and then we have the Cyrillic letters as well. And I think there's some. I'm not sure what characters these ones are, but I think some of the machines we also have the Japanese characters. And then there's a pocket, because I can then add my own stitches. I had created my own stitch, and it looks like not much of a fancy stitch. What it was, I was stitching down a rickrack, and I want to use the serpentine stitch. Well, the size of a rickrack was kind of like between the 2 stitch lengths. So I had adjusted as wide as I could, but the stitch length was kind of like if I had it 1 step, it went too far. If it was 1 step down, it was too short. So what I did, I kind of determined that if I had a couple of the longer stitches and then 1 short, and then again couple long and then short. I have to close this one. Let me step. So that way, then I was able to kind of line this up, so I didn't have to manually keep changing. It was just one of those things I figured out that I can do my own. So sometimes I do program my own stitches as well. And I can save them on my machine's memory. I could save them on my memory stick or even send wirelessly. Because if I have that P11 software, I could even create some of the stitches on my embroidery software and save them back and forth. Rather, we have little extra buttons. I can create my own stitches. So if I don't like any of the stitches that came with the machine, even my editing them and combining, I can go totally and take my own. Yep, I can cancel that one. So I get the little screen. So if I want to do my own stitch, I will just tell where I want to have my needles to go. So I'm not really planning any pretty stitches. I'm just gonna go and do a little set in there. This is gonna be the most amazing kind of stitch, and I can kind of fine tune it a little bit there too with the arrows. So I can do my own stitch. So this is gonna be the most interesting stitch. And then I do set. And now if I do test, that is my stitch that I just created. Just clicking the buttons and then I continue stitching. I can still change the size a little bit if I want to make a little bit, adjust that one. And the tension, of course. So I just made my own stitch. And if I really like it, I can save it in the memory. I don't think so. I'm gonna say, yep, forget that one. It was just a test. So, yep, I can add my own, I can make my own stitches, but that's a brother exclusive feature. Then there's another button on this one that is a drop-down menu. Again, because I don't have any stitches selected at the moment, only option I have is a drop the feed dogs. So let me pick up some stitch in there. Maybe not, that's not a good one for my example. Let me use that one. So on this case, now what we can do is, again, I still have the beginning of the pattern or just a single pattern, all those same functions as I had in the utility side. And I can do the mirror like I did in the utility side. But now I also have a mirror horizontal. Well, again, this was not a good stitch for that one. Let me see if I can find one that is not symmetrical that way. So we have so many stitches to pick up. Lots of them are symmetrical going that way. Oh, there's one. There's a good one in there. So this one in here is going kind of down the way. So that was a default on that. I can flip it horizontal, sorry, vertical, but I can also flip it horizontal. So that can I have any of those options on these character decorative stitches. On the utility stitches, you only have the option to do the vertical. And then, yep, most of these ones we can't use a double needle because they are just too complicated for that one. And then if I don't want that stitch, I can hit delete on that one. Now there's a little difference on the models. All the other than Solaris and Luminaire, if I had picked up the stitch and I didn't sew it out and I picked up another stitch, it will start combining. So I would have to delete between. Solaris and Luminaire, they kind of made it so that if I want to combine these stitches like I had done that my stitch, I had to touch the plus button, and now I can add on other stitch to that one. So that way I can just to go and then maybe add on other. This is going to be a really weird looking kind of stitch in here. And then if I wanted to still go and adjust some of the ones, I can go and just select that stitch to see which I'm adjusting. If I select this button, now I can adjust the entire stitch. And yep, this is one long stitch, long pattern now, because I just created my own pattern. And I can have it to go continuous or do one pattern only. And then there's a little linking them together also. That will kind of link so that I can proportionally move the width and the length on that one. So lots of options on this one. So we just had a few extra patterns that we have on this on the character decorative side.
The last couple things that I have on the kind of summarize this class, the adjusting and calibrating screen. Well, we can change the screen contrast just by changing on the setting screen, but then we have another kind of a calibration thing that can be done. And sometimes we get onto this page accidentally. So if you turn on your machine while you are touching the screen, your screen will look, when your machine turns on, your screen will look very different. And it kind of may frighten you the first time. It's like, what it happened? Did I break the machine? What happened on that point? That if you were holding on the screen while you turned your machine on, you'll get onto the screen calibration area. And that is to be done only if your screen is not responding to the selected commands, meaning if you are touching an icon and actually one beside it gets activated. So that just means the calibration would be off. I have to say that so far all these years I have never had to do this one on a machine. I have done it on the scan and cut couple times with the smaller screen, but it isn't available for user to do. So in this case, if you accidentally got onto that mode, all you have to do is just turn off your machine, wait 15 seconds, and turn it back on, and just without touching the screen. So it'll be coming back as normal. But if you need to recalibrate the screen and you go onto this mode, you need to follow the instructions exactly. There are certain points that you need to touch with the stylus on the screen, and that will then calibrate the screen to the proper. And then after that one, you will turn your machine off, wait 15 seconds, turn it back on. But then upgrading software. We can do the updates on the software with different ways. And on my machine, on the demo, I was showing how I can do that update or wirelessly. But then you can also always, and some of the other machines that don't have wireless connection, you need to do it either with the memory stick or some machines by connecting the computer cable. And I have listed on this last part the websites on the where currently you can find the updates. Again, sometimes the companies change their websites a little bit, and these addresses might be different. But as of recording on this video, these addresses will take you to the right place. So if I click the Baby Lock one there, I will get on the Baby Lock website for the support page. And there are information about all the machines. You can download manuals, spec sheets, all kinds of information about the machines. So if I have a Baby Lock Solaris, then I would just click that one. And on the right side, there's the download manuals and all the pieces of paperwork that you can download. other kind of interesting thing also, always a handy one to look, is this USB media chart. Often I get a question, what kind of memory sticks can I use? Well, if you use any of these ones that are listed on this one, those are factory tested, that will definitely work. There are many others that will work, but then these are definitely things that have been tested by the factory. There are certain models they actually marked that won't work with the sewing machine, but there's a big variety of that does. So that's another handy resource, and that varies between different models. But on the left side, there is where you can find the latest update if you want to download this update, and they also always have a date. For the first part on the Solaris, there was an earlier one that had the video update. That was really on the original ones. When we first got the machines, they didn't have all the videos yet on that one. So those should be all now already all uploaded. But then the latest upload on here on this one, yeah, as a recording on this video, was on December 2019. So I could download the zip file and then unzip it and then follow the instructions, because this download will have the instructions also how to install that one. And then if I go to the brother's side, on that one, on that address that I had on my presentation, you just enter your machine model number. And if I have the Luminaire, the model number is XP1. So you will look on the back of your machine on that metal plate that has the serial number. There is also model number. So I would enter that one and click search, and then it will get me onto the page where I can get onto the downloads. And that one, there's the downloads. Also, I can download the manuals, and you just have to follow the prompts on this one, tell what model you have, and here I could download the latest software. And again, it's the same date as for the Solaris. And I will get the same kind of information about how to install it and what the update was doing.